Hey, listen, so in 1971, these college students were locked in a fake prison, and within days, some turned into sadistic guards, while others broke down crying. And the guy in charge, that man just watched it happen. You probably heard of the Stanford Prison Experiment, but here's the thing. Most people don't really know how staged, manipulated, and ethically disastrous it actually was. See, it wasn't just a social experiment gone wrong. It was a full-blown psychological train wreck. You had fake arrests, power trips, and a lead researcher who might have been the weirdest one there. But I'll tell you what's wild is how quickly the story of this experiment became modern legend, repeated in textbooks, documentaries, and pop culture as a cautionary tale about power and human nature. But see, the real truth behind the legend is way messier, stranger, and far less black and white than you probably heard. It's a mix of ambition, ego, and cross-ethical lines all under the banner of science. So stay with me so we can figure out what really happened in that basement. Cause I'll tell you right now, they had some freak nasty Diddy parties going on. So to start, what was the Stanford Prison Experiment? Well, in August 1971, there was this psychologist Philip Zimbardo and his team, and they set up a mock prison in the basement of Stanford University's psychology building. What was their goal? It was to study how ordinary people would behave when given power and placed in an oppressive environment. See, they could just look for politicians for the answer, but instead it looked like they wanted to recruit 24 male healthy college students and then assign half of them as prisoners and half of them as guards. Now see, the prisoners, they were arrested at their homes by real police, booked, and then brought into the fake prison, complete with cells, uniforms, all those strict ass rules. See, we don't love that. I would not want to be one of them. Fuck all that. But then the fake guards were given uniforms, whistles, and sunglasses, to create a sense of authority. See, Zimbardo, he wanted to see how power would corrupt and how quickly people would adapt to their assigned roles. But what originally started as a controlled experiment quickly devolved into this nightmare of abuse, psychological torment, and moral collapse. And see, the experiment was only scheduled to last 2 weeks, but the shit had to be abruptly shut down after just 6 days due to escalating trauma suffered by the participants. Bro, you can't just relax for 2 weeks. I don't get it. And then it was reported that one of the more unsettling parts was how real the arrest felt for the fake prisoners. See, the local police actually collaborated with Zimbardo, showing up at students' houses unannounced, handcuffing them, and booking them at the police station. So it wasn't exactly just role play, it was kind of like a psychological ambush. Because these dudes, they weren't hardened criminals, they weren't gangsters. So for many of these guys, it was their first encounter with the criminal justice system. So that random sudden loss of freedom, it hit hard. The disorientation from the moment alone really set the stage for the mental breakdowns that would follow. See, it really blurred the lines between simulation and just imprisonment. And honestly, we still see this damn dynamic play out today. Just look around your workplace, bro. We've all seen that one grown-ass man who was clearly bullied in high school, and now he's a manager or supervisor on a power trip. And it's like, bro, you are the last person who should have been given authority. But you think you've heard the crazy stuff. Bro, stay on this video because we're about to dig into one of these idiots next. See, Zimbardo, he crossed the line. And this is exactly where the story starts to get ugly. Because the Stanford Prison Experiment is now infamous for its complete disregard for ethics and ethical code. See, this man Zimbardo didn't just run the show. He tried to star in it. He took on multiple roles, like lead researcher and prison superintendent or warden. Now, bro, that's a massive conflict of interest stripped away from any chance of real oversight. But here's the thing, is that it really gets worse because Zimbardo got so emotionally wrapped up in the whole thing. His job was just to observe, right? But instead, his ass became part of the experiment, taking on the role of warden. Bro, it didn't just give him a front seat, it made this man an active player in the abuse to follow. So this role reversal thing of prisoners and guards, it completely shattered his objectivity. Instead of protecting the prisoners, he basically egged the guards on to do some weird psychological torture shit and said it was for valuable data. So now, do y'all remember I was talking about that kid from high school who was clearly bullied and now he's a power tripping manager, right? I'm telling you, Zimbardo is him. This man's job was to sit in the bleachers and take notes, not run onto the field trying to play quarterback. He's basically like a movie director yelling, "Hey yo, let me be the dude in the sex scene though." No dog, go sit your ass behind the camera. See, Zimbardo essentially just let the guards run completely wild. From sleep deprivation, humiliation, all the way to psychological mind games, you name it, Zimbardo was down for it, bro. One guard even forced prisoners to perform degrading acts on him, and some of the prisoners had full-on emotional breakdowns. But even through all that, Zimbardo barely even lifted a finger to stop any of it. See, he just watched like a little freak, as if he were some detached scientist just collecting valuable data instead of all the trauma he was seeing. And as you could probably guess, this man was most likely a simp. So it wasn't even until this young psychology grad student, Christina Maslach, came to visit the mock prison that things really started to snap into focus. See, she was horrified, bro. She called him out, and it took her voice to finally make Zimbardo shut down the whole thing. I'm telling you, this man was simping, bro. This is Zimbardo. Literally, the first female shows up to the prison, and this man immediately becomes a good person, talking about, hey, there's something wrong going on here, bro. We gotta stop this experiment. But honestly, it was great because this experiment was trash. There was no informed consent. There was no mental health protections. There was no way to safely opt out of it. It's literally the go-to example in every psychology textbook on what not to do in human research. But still, despite the train wreck, it was hailed as groundbreaking, which really makes you wonder, was it science in the first place or just sensationalism dressed up in a lab coat? Anyway, back to that guard I mentioned a second ago. Because no, I'm not just gonna breeze past that man like he wasn't doing some full-on freak Diddy shit in fake prison. Bro, this is why we need to bring bullying back. Buddy, what are you doing making pretend prisoners perform degrading acts on you? That's not scientific curiosity. That's repressed basement demon energy. Someone should have smacked you in the back of the head with a brick or a Popeye's biscuit, bro. Matter of fact, you need a blue dot on your house and a car alarm that goes off anytime you within 44 miles of a school, bro. You nasty freak. But look, I know you may be sitting there thinking, hey, Zimbardo was a bad guy, but at least the experiment was good and, gave good scientific research. But listen, was it really some organic social experiment? Nah, it wasn't. Slow down, big dog. See, it turns out Zimbardo and his team staged and scripted parts of it to steer behavior in certain directions. Now hold on, bro. I swear if I find out the sucking off part was stage 2, I'm canceling the whole study in 2025. But listen, all the guards, they were coached on how to intimidate prisoners, even to the point where some of their actions were orchestrated on purpose just to see what would happen. So see, that's not really observation, that's actual manipulation. And it even gets worse than that. Some of the prisoners later admitted that they were just playing along the whole time. They weren't even genuinely broken. They were either just performing for the camera or just doing what they thought they were supposed to. This one guy, Dave Eshelman, flat out said he faked an entire emotional breakdown just so he could get out early. This man was trying to make the Denny's 2-for-1 deal. But stuff like this really makes you ask how much of this was even real and how much was just people acting like their ass was on an episode of Cops. Because when you have the cameras on, you're dealing with the observer effect. See, it's the effect whenever people know they're being watched, or worse, being coached, they change big time for the camera. And I know that this observer effect is definitely real because I'm telling you, if I was one of those prisoners, I'd be acting a straight up fool. Like, bro, I know this isn't death row. I'm not actually about to get tossed in the electric chair. Hey, and if a guard put his hands on me, we wouldn't need scientific data to figure out what would happen next. I'll tell you, the only thing I would really be worried about is fake Officer Kenny trying to get serviced in the janitor's closet. But don't worry, Officer Kenny, I would have a prison shank ready with your damn name on it. I will say though, as controversial as Philip Zimbardo was, he really was a fascinating dude. See, outside this mess, this dude actually was a respected psychologist who legit made contributions to social psychology. It was mainly just this Stanford Prison Experiment that tainted his legacy, let's say. And I really think what messed him up was that dual role he tried to play between the lead researcher and prison superintendent, because that blurred the lines between scientist and showrunner. And his critics actually say his own personality and ambition drove the experiment more than any scientific method ever could. And then honestly, to make matters worse, this dude has defended the whole thing over the years, saying that the reactions reveal deep truths about authority and human nature. But that defense kind of falls apart when you remember how slow he was to stop the abuse and how this man orchestrated it, bro. Like, what are you talking about, simp? I think he forgot that that's not the scientific method, that's just his ego. But I will say eventually he did apologize for all the ethical failures. But his ass did wait to apologize after he already sold books, TED Talks, and documentaries. So this man was really walking a fine line between self-promotion and true reflecting. Hey, and listen, this will not surprise any of y'all. See, some scholars even argue that his obsession with authoritarianism came from his own upbringing. From like post-war America, social instability, yada yada yada. Basically, this man built a psychological hellscape to work through his own past childhood trauma, bro. What the fuck? See, and you remember I told y'all from the beginning, this man was one of those bullied kids. See, you know the type. He got picked last in dodgeball, the girls never looked his way, and now here he is designing an entire experiment just to metaphorically crack whips on the popular kids' backs. Corny ass dude, bro. This man had people getting tortured because his dad popped them on the ass? I'm just saying, this experiment was never about understanding authority. It was about finally getting to feel like he had some authority. But anyway, beyond all the personal stuff, this experiment, it did spark something bigger. See, a full-on cultural obsession with how regular people become evil. You've probably seen it everywhere, from true crime breakdowns to films like The Experiment and the Stanford Prison Experiment. The idea that anyone can just become a monster if you give them power is kind of seductive, but it also oversimplifies the complexity of human behavior. See, it turns everything into a neat little story about how power corrupts without asking all the harder questions like, okay, well, why and how does it corrupt though? But listen, in the end, the Stanford Prison Experiment, it really reminds us of one crucial thing. Just because we can run an experiment doesn't mean we should run the damn experiment. Also, here's a little fun twist. One of the guards, David Eshelman, right? He later admitted he was basically acting the entire time. He just said that he used some humor and fake intimidation tactics to keep the whole thing light. This man was doing performance art, not psychological warfare. And see, that's the kind of guard I could vibe with. Because, like I said earlier, if I was a prisoner, I'd be putting on a whole damn stage play. This is fake jail, bro. No one's actually gonna get shanked. And if I'm in here, I'm gonna give you a show. But that's just me as a prisoner. If I was one of the guards, bro, you would never catch me screaming at someone in a basement just because they gave me a whistle and a name tag, because I had more than 15 brain cells. Which is honestly more than what I could say for some of these other guards in this little improv prison hellhole. But honestly, I will say, I think that we missed a real opportunity for a follow-up experiment. We could throw Zimbardo in a cage and see how many rounds he would last against some UFC heavyweights. You know, for science. So the next time you hear about the Stanford Prison Experiment, just remember that there's a lot more beneath the surface than a simple power corrupts story. It was a huge tangled mess of ethic violations, manipulation, and a lot of human suffering. And if you want to dive deeper into some, WTF moments in psychology and history, then hit that like button and subscribe, and turn on that little ring bell thing so you never miss one of these crazy stories about the weird side of science. But like always, stay safe out there, and I'm gonna see y'all next time.